Gyaneshwar Chaubey. He is, as I had said earlier, a professor at the Department of Zoology at Banaras Hindu University. You heard a linguist before this. Now we will hear a geneticist on his views on the topic how genetics is transforming the age-old theories of the Indian subcontinent. A few words about Dr. Gyaneshwar Chaubey. He's, as I said, a geneticist known for his in-depth work on diverse South Asian ethnic groups, including Himalayan, Andaman, Austroasiatic, Dravidian, Indian Jews, Siddhi, Roma, and Parsis. His research has had significant impact from identifying the AGNALA. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly when I say Ajnala skeleton, using cutting edge DNA analysis in 2022, a top research accomplishment that year, to prompting the Indian government to return the relics of Queen Ketevan to Georgia in 2021. He is a prolific researcher, earning accolades like the quote unquote most Productive Researcher Award at Banaras Hindu University and recognition as one of the top 2% highly cited scientists globally within parenthesis Stanford University. Dr. Chaubey actively shares his knowledge through public lectures, columns in major newspapers like Dainik Jagran, and invitations to prestigious events like the National Geographic Symposium and the Linda Nobel Laureates meeting. His dedication to understanding and celebrating South Asian identities has earned him recognition as a leading scholar and a valuable voice in shaping cultural understanding. Recent highlights include receiving the BIRD, which is BioClue's Innovation Research and Development Award in 2022, and winning the GenCo USA Challenge for sequencing 300 Zoroastrian samples. He is currently, as mentioned earlier, a professor at the Department of Zoology at Banaras Hindu University. I welcome you, Dr. Chaubey, and I request you to commence your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Meghji, and thanks for inviting me here. It has been pleasure. As Misra sir already said that the Indian diversity is too high comparing to any other parts of the world. Actually, it is second after Africa. And this is a very common saying in North India that kos pe pani badle teen kos pe bani. This is not because of a different linguistic ancestor, but this is because of the long-term settlement of us in the subcontinent. So let us bring some detailed idea about the genetics. I can add here that this is one of the fastest moving discipline now. And with the new information coming out from various parts of the world, we are adding many new things related with the age-old theories, where some of the theories has been already discarded, but it is good at least to know that what are those theories and how genetics, the new data in genetics, they are helping us to understand it. And the knowledge about Indian subcontinent is still very infancy stage. For example, like there was just one sample from the Indus Valley civilization, and this one sample has changed a lot of things. And based on the DNA data of this just one female sample, it has been showed that the most Indian population, they carry this ancestry. So this is one of the major ancestry contributor of the Indian subcontinent. So as soon as when this Ganga Plain ancient samples would come out, we are expecting more and more contribution related to the peopling of India. So in 2011, when Hindustan Times made a survey related with when they compared two random individuals from India and they wanted to see whether they understand each other's language, then they found that there is a chance that within 1.6% to 95% chance that they would understand each other, they can talk with each other. But what about the genetics? Any two random Indians living in any part of the India, if we analyze their sample for the DNA, there is a greater chance that they would share more than 45% to 100% of their genetic ancestry. So genes, it binds us, but this is because of the fast evolution of the language comparing to the genes. Genes evolve a bit slower than the languages. So overall, South Asia, it has a nearly one-fourth of the total world population, huge number of individuals, they are living in India. But this is not since few thousand years. We'll see further in my presentation that once upon a time, just 25,000 years back, half of the world population was living in South Asia. So this is one of the major region where people have lived. So in the present time, if we look to the linguistic distribution, the Indo-Europeans, they are majorly covering the central, eastern, and the northern part of India, whereas Dravidian are confined to the, with some pockets like Kuruk and Malto into the central part. Otherwise, they are present in southern part of India. The Tibeto-Burmans are trans-Himalayans, are present at the fringes of Himalaya. And then the Austroasiatics, they are also in pockets to the central and eastern part of India. Not only these language group, we also have the linguistic isolates. For example, Burusaski in Pakistan, Kusunda in Nepal, Nihali in the central part of India, and Veda in Sri Lanka. So these linguistic isolates also shows a detailed ancestry about the Indian population. So there are three major disciplines, that is archaeology, linguistics, as well as genetics. And all of them, if we look to the consensus, then archaeology says that the human occupation in South Asia was continue even after the Mount Toba eruption, which has happened nearly 74,000 years back. So people in India, they were there before Toba as well as after Toba. So whereas the genetics says that at least the Indian population have been, the India has been peopled with the modern human at least 50 to 65,000 years back. That was the major out of Africa migration. But there were also some archaeological information which says that based on the tool technology that Indian population, there are some archaic human as well who are living in the subcontinent. Whereas the problematic thing comes with the linguistic information. Many of the linguistic experts say that none of the Indian language which are being spoken into the Indian subcontinent, they are originated in India. Whereas now new researches are coming up and they are showing that in Dravidian indigenous, and there are other language families which are showing an indigenous development. So overall, if we take the summary of the information which comes mainly from the linguistic, which says that the first earliest occupation of the subcontinent was by Austroasiatic people who came nearly 60 to 65,000 years back as a out of Africa migrant. They are the ancient settlers. Then they were dispersed and driven into smaller groups with the arrival of Dravidian speaker who came from Iran, the Mesopotamia, nearly 3000 BC, that is 5,000 years back. Then they have again pushed by another group of people, that is Indo-Aryan, nearly 1500 years back. But these theories, even now there are linguistic information, there are archaeological information, there are genetic information. They all are now in a consensus that at least these theories are not at all correct with the peopling of South Asian population. So before the autosomal ancestry, before the new technology, there was information about the mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome. So this mitochondrial and Y chromosome, they are in a consensus which says that the major part of Indian ancestry is autochthonous, that is indigenous. Then at the borders, that is the northwestern part of India, that is northeastern part of India, the European related ancestry are also shared with some population, as well as the East Eurasian ancestry is also shared with some population. So overall, if we look to the genetics, that what geneticists do. So overall, a human body has nearly 37.2 trillion cells, and this human body, each and every cell has a nucleus at the center, and there are mitochondria. More nucleus is just one, whereas there are more number of mitochondria. So we study the mitochondrial DNA, we study the autosomes, we study the Y chromosome, and based on the consensus of these details, we reconstruct the phylogeny. Overall, if we look to we study mitochondrial DNA, then it is very easy to understand the maternal ancestry. If we study Y chromosome, it's very easy and straightforward to understand the paternal ancestry that also relates with our Gotra system. But what about these people who are also our ancestors? So in this case, there is a third kind of genetic information which comes from the autosomes. But these autosomes, we receive 50% from our mother, 50% from our father. And as we go back, this reduces 50% from each generations. So this is why this is more technical, and there are a lot of modeling, there are a lot of statistics are needed to understand this level of ancestry. So in 2005, when we worked on the Andaman Islanders, we found that they are the remnants of the first migration, which has happened nearly 65,000 years back from Africa. And we thought that we solved all the problems, and there is a southern route migration which has brought the Indian population to India from Africa. But then in 2015, when we worked on the complete genome, that is 3.2 billion bases of the human genomes, then we understood that it is much more complex, the modern human origin, because there are early migration which has very small imprint on the present human population. Then there is a major out of Africa migration. So and then not only the early human migrations, there are archaic humans, that is Neanderthal and Denisovan. They have also given introgressed, their DNA has been introgressed to modern human, and each and every human population living in this globe, they have 1 to 4% of the Neanderthal ancestry and nearly 1 to 6% of the Denisovan ancestry. So this is how things are going nowadays. And since since nearly 5 years, these things are updating, changing, and we know that there are many more branches of the modern human or even archaic human origin. So with the time, when we learn more about the origin of the modern human, I think this tree is going to get more and more complex. So Harvard University was one of the major contributor to understand the population and genetics of the Indian subcontinent. Let us see that what they have found so far and what is their lacuna. So in 2009, they published that on the Indian population, that there are two kind of ancestry: ancestral North Indian and ancestral South Indian population. And Indian population, all the Indian population, they are in between these ancestries. Later, they found out that the ancestral North Indian and ancestral South Indian, they existed in purest form nearly 4,200 years back. So 1900 to 4,200 years, there was a great mixing of ancestral North Indian and ancestral South Indian population. But there is a caveat here, that they have not included here the Austroasiatic or Tibeto-Burman population, because that was not fitting in the decline of the Indian population. But there were many more things that we would understand later in the presentation. So the major reason for this was that they wanted to fit them with the earliest migrants of the Indian subcontinent, but the story was quite different from that. Then they have brought another paper in 2019. There they again reinforced that the ancestral North Indian and ancestral South Indian ancestries exist into the population, and few population they are like Onges, and then they are more closely related with the ancestral South Indian population, but all of the Indian population at the moment, they are mixed in between these two groups. Then in later in 2019, when the Harappan genome came up, they found out that the Harappan genome was already split from the Iranian farmers and Iranian ancestry. That was nearly more than 10,000 BC, so that was nearly 12,000 years back. And there is a Indus Valley civilization cline that is mixed with Andaman-related hunter-gatherer population and the Indus Valley related ancestry. And at the moment, most of the Indian population, they have these two kind of common ancestries. So overall, the things changed from the publication 1 to publication 5th or 6th. And there they showed that the ANI and ASI construct is at the moment not really true. Now the ASI construct is broken into AASI, ancient ancestral South Indian ancestry, whereas this is related with the hunting gathering population of South Asia, not with the South Indian population in reality. Whereas the Indus Valley civilization clinal pattern, that was also present in the other part of the Central Asian population. So overall, if we look to the Indian population, there is a that is clear that there is a cline, but this cline is not associated with the language. This cline is associated with the geographical separation. And here we can see that all the South Asian population, they have two distinct ancestries. They are made up of two distinct ancestry, irrespective of their linguistic or the geographical separation. But these two ancestries, they are mostly one. This dark green ancestry is mainly present among the Indian subcontinent, whereas the light green ancestry is shared with European and even with the Caucasian population. So when we have looked to the diversity, so diversity means usually the higher diversity represent the origin of the region, and there we found out that the diversity of this light green ancestry was nearly equally high among the Iranian as well as the South Asian population, and the separation was nearly more than 12,500 years back, whereas the dark green ancestry, that has showed a clear-cut distinction and very high diversity among the South Asian population. And overall, if we look to the ancestral sharing of the South Asian population, we can clearly see that they all are stemming out from one node that showed that the differentiation of the population has happened later, but they all share a common ancestor. And then the modern Indus Valley population also showed the mixed kind of ancestry, and this mixed kind of ancestry was associated mainly with the North Indian related ancestry that was majorly present among the North Indian population, except there were two populations like Roar and Jat. They shared nearly 5 to 10% of their ancestry that was related with the European population, Estonian, Latvian, Lithuanians, but that was nearly 15 generations old, that is 1500 years old ancestry. So probably they are the population Roar and Jat who migrated from Central Asia to India and mixed with the local population, but still the level of ancestry was much more lower than we expect for them. So if we go back to 50,000 years and try to see that what has happened 50,000 years back, then we see that the initial peopling, when the people have started migrating from Africa to South Asia and other part of the Asian subcontinent, we should see a stepwise process, like the most ancient haplogroups into the Africa, then second most ancient to the Middle East, then further to the Iran, and then to the India. But overall, if we see these kind of pattern, then we see that the most ancient is indeed present in Africa, but then second most ancient is more towards the eastern part of India and to the southeastern part of the Asia. So these three groups, they showed that the initial separation was happened into Asia when the human has first migrated from Africa towards the Asia. This was the major region. This region has helped, this region has nurtured to the population, and later this population has given rise the old and new world population. So of course, the current information says that Africa is the birthplace for modern human, but the South Asia, including the eastern part and the Southeast Asia, that has acted as a nurturing place for the modern human origin. Then we have modeled based on the mitochondrial genome, and we found out that nearly 25,000 years back, half of the global population, they have lived in the South Asia. So that was effective population size, and this effective population size represent the number of actively reproducing males or females. So and then the question comes that whether the Austroasiatic tribal they are the first people who came to the Indian subcontinent. And there was a series of paper from various groups, and these papers they all shows that the Austroasiatic people, they are the first settlers. They are the first one who came from who are the one who came from Africa to India, and then other people came from different regions. And the most striking was the one of the great scientists of the Indian subcontinent. He's working in USA. He wrote a note on the NIASI paper of David Reich, Professor Arvinda Chakravarti, and without mentioning any references, he has bluntly added that the earliest occupant was the same theory which I said initially, that these are myth. So we wanted to test whether the Austroasiatic people are the first who came nearly 60,000 years back to the Indian subcontinent. So, and there are as well some linguistic support. There is some Indologist support that also said the same. So we collected nearly 600 samples from the Indian Munda population, and then 962 Southeast and East Asian population, and these we covered nearly all the Austroasiatic population of the Indian subcontinent. So what was most interesting, that there was a very distinct maternal and paternal ancestry for Austroasiatic population. Their maternal ancestry showed nearly 100% of their association with the South Asia, whereas paternal ancestry, the ancestry which comes from father, which shows that they have nearly 70% of their paternal ancestry that is associated with the Southeast Asia. What does it mean? That the father is from different subcontinent and mother is from different subcontinent. So then we went ahead. We thought that this is because the Austroasiatic people, they are living near to the Southeast Asia, and this is because of the isolation by distance model, that there is a diffusion of chromosome without the migration of any population. But there we found that there is no geographical similarity of these kind of ancestry. So then we have used better ancestry marker, the autosomal ancestry marker, and then we wanted to see that what is the situation. So here, this is Khasi, this is the Austroasiatic population, and this is the Indian cline. And here we can clearly see that the Austroasiatic people, they are indeed more closer to the Indian subcontinent population, but they are also showing some related ancestry which is associated with the Southeast Asian Austroasiatic population. What does it mean? That suggests that there is a mixture of ancestry of these population, but this result did not show that there was some kind of migration from one direction to another direction. Then we went ahead and we found a gene, that is EDAR gene, and this gene is a pleiotropic gene that controls a lot of phenotypic character. And here this gene is nearly fixed into the East and Southeast Asian population. So people who would have this ancestry, they would also carry these genes. And among the Indian population, we see that the Tibeto-Burman population, they have a nearly 61% of this gene. The Khasi has nearly 40%, but Austroasiatic, the Mundari group, has nearly only 5% of this gene among the Indian Mundari population. So there was some relation of the Munda with the Southeast Asian population. Then we wanted to see what is the time of the admixture of this population with the Indian subcontinent population. So overall, if we look to the ancestral components present among the South Asian population, we can see that either it is a North Indian population or South Indian or even a tribal, Nihali, Gond, South Munda, North Munda. They all have nearly a common ancestral sources, except for the North Munda and South Munda, which has one additional component which was more prominent to the Southeast Asian population. That shows their connection with the Southeast Asian population. And we can see that the Austroasiatic, mainly this was driven by the male population. They migrated from Southeast Asia to South Asia and mixed with the local populations. And here the identity by descent segments, when we share more bigger identity by descent segments, it means there is a recent common ancestry. When we share shorter IBD segments, that shows more ancient common ancestry. So here we can see that the Austroasiatic population, they share a more recent common ancestry with the Southeast Asian population. That shows their linguistic connection. Whereas with the Indian population, they share a most ancient common ancestral segments. And overall, when we have modeled this, we found a relation of 29% to 71%. 29% was with the Laos population, and with the Dravidian Kerala population, that was 71% of the ancestry. And the mixture of these two ancestry component was happened nearly 2,200 to 3,700 years back. And further, by using the Y chromosome, we found that there were 4 ancestral founder of this Mundari population, which has who have brought this Austroasiatic ancestry to the Indian population from Southeast Asia. And the 4th founder was very exclusive, that was present among the Manipuri and Bangladeshi Tibeto-Burman population. So it means that the male-mediated migration has happened, probably carrying the Austroasiatic language nearly last 5,000 years back. Then in 2014, when we have analyzed the mitochondrial genome of 4 samples coming from the Mesopotamia, ancient samples. So this was coming at 4 different timelines, and all of these groups shared the common ancestry with the Indian subcontinent population. These all are Indian haplogroups that was present among the Indian population, and the network showed that they are mostly embedded into the Indian population branches. And these this is probably the long-term sharing between the Mesopotamia and South Asia, and that was mostly driven by the connection between these two regions. So if we model overall the South Asian, East Eurasian, and West Eurasian ancestries with the Indian population, we can identify a few of the population and their palette overall in this ancestry, that which population carried what level of ancestries. And overall, if we test the genes and languages, genes and geography, we can see that genes and language separation is not at all significant and only represent 14.7% of the correlation, whereas genes and geographical separation of South Asian population is highly significant, 73.2% of the correlation. So it means that if someone in Punjab speaking Punjabi and someone in Kerala is speaking Dravidian language, they are separated with their genes not because of their language, that is because of their long geographical separation and long term of isolation. And we have also compared the Sri Lankan population, where we showed that the ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka between the two populations is not at all show any association of their genetic connection. Where we compare the two populations, Sinhalese who speak the Indo-Aryan branches, whereas Tamil who are the Dravidian branches. So these two populations, they shared a very close common ancestry. Here, if we don't mark here Sinhalese and don't mark here Sri Lankan Tamils, we can't differentiate these two ancestries which are present into the Sri Lankan subcontinent. So that suggests that the population which has migrated from Tamil Nadu nearly 2,500 years back, population which has migrated from Maharashtra nearly 2,500 years back, they are mixed in such a high level of ancestry that it is very difficult to differentiate them. And we link this with the Maratha population, the Sinhala population, which shared nearly 16% more of their ancestry with the Maratha, comparing to the Sri Lankan Tamil population. So this is how the Tamils and then the Sinhalese, they are sharing a very common ancestry irrespective of their linguistic conflict or even ethnic conflict. So many people suggest that the R1A, that is a Y chromosomal haplogroup, is this a marker of Aryan related ancestry? And overall, if we look to the distribution of this haplogroup, that is a widespread present into the Europe as well as to the South Asia. And there was a paper by Silva et al. And that was wrongly showed that the most of the Indian Y chromosome ancestry is associated with the European ancestry, whereas when we corrected it, we found out that they just associated two haplogroups. They have left the haplogroup L and haplogroup R2, that these haplogroups are also indigenous to the South Asia. And here, even if we we give a different color for haplogroup R1A, we still see that major part of the Y chromosomal ancestry of South Asia is indigenous. And they have used just the 1,000 genome samples. They were coming from out of India, mostly from the people who migrated few hundred years back from India to UK or to USA. So they represent is only a subset of population. This is why we have seen such kind of nested structure. Whereas when we have compared all Indian population, we found that each and every node carried the Indian samples, and these node, the most ancestral node, has been also carried by many population living in the vicinity of Himalaya. So when we have again newly constructed the haplogroup R1A and R2, we found out that the major part of the haplogroup R1A, that is M78, M780 and M634, this has a major concentration towards the Ganga plain, and probably it has originated into the Gangetic plain. So nearly 95% of the R1A ancestry is showing a Holocene time of 4,300 years back, and their origin into the Gangetic plain population. And overall, if we look to different branches and their variation among the Indian subcontinent, we can see that there is a very clear-cut distribution of this R1A branches into various parts of the Indian subcontinent. So overall, based on the present result, we can see that the genetic component which are shared among different population, that reflects a long-term isolation, as well as that was mainly founded over the indigenous component. And the ancient settler, the one who came out of Africa, that persists even each and every language groups of India, and that includes caste population as well as the tribal population. And Indian geography is the major denominator for the genetic landscape rather than the languages. So thank you very much for your kind attention. This is my group which is working, and also the collaborators from various institutions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chaubey, for presenting your views on the topic how genetics is transforming the age-old theories of the Indian subcontinent. That was Professor Gyaneshwar Chaubey from the Department of Zoology, Banaras Hindu University.